Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is L. Gregory Jones, President of Belmont University. I will tell you all about President Jones in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that focuses on what's often called the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert for others. And when you do it as a leader does, and as you will very much discover that President Jones is, you do it with the purpose of bringing people together for common cause. Greg Jones, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Thank you. It's a great joy to be with you, John.
Great. I want to tell folks all about you. You did your undergraduate at University of Denver, and you got your Doctor of Divinity at Duke University, and you've got a whole bunch of awards. You have a multi-varied career. You are an ordained minister. You are a noted author. You headed a divinity school, and now you're the president of Belmont University. In between, you wrote a whole bunch of books. And you and your wife, whom I had the pleasure of meeting, are the parents of 2 kids and 4 grandkids.
3 kids and 4 grandkids.
3 kids and 4 grandkids. So welcome to the show. Great. I want to tell you about it. Belmont University is nationally ranked. 9,000 students from every country, 36 countries and every state in the union. You established your career, or maybe nationally, at Duke Divinity School. What led you to want to become a university president?
One of the things I discovered being a dean at a major university was the love of collaboration across schools and across different vocations, and discovered that I really loved innovation and building things together. And so I was pretty clear I didn't want to go to a small liberal arts college. That I really would rather be in a university that has different vocations. And so a university like Belmont that spans business and music and the arts and healthcare and the sciences was just a great fit for me.
That's great. Well, I had the privilege of being there along with my colleagues, and you're a member of our 100 coaches group. And I'll tell you, the infrastructure of Belmont University just knocked me out, and especially the Performing Arts Center. So you have a long connection to to Belmont through your grandmother. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I didn't actually know that until my appointment was announced, and my uncle sent me a note and said, "Did you know that your grandmother was a student at Ward Belmont, the predecessor institution of Belmont University?" And I said, "Wow, I didn't realize that." We then found her transcript in our archives, and it's now hanging in my office. And I discovered that she wasn't nearly as good a student as she made herself out to be as a grandmother. I think she was more interested in my grandfather than she was in me. Ward Belmont 100 years ago this fall.
Oh, that's great. You know, when you told that story, I remember thinking my grandmother attended a 2-year college to become a teacher. So, and that was about 100 years ago, maybe a little bit more. So amazing how things turn around. Yes, so, Sanyan Singh, whom you know very well, and again, a member of 100 Coaches and an extraordinary coach and giving person, told me that you have a phrase applied to you called tradition to innovation. That almost sounds oppositional. What does it mean?
Well, it's really a phrase that I coined the phrase because I was tired of hearing people talk about innovation as if it was just making stuff up. That from everything I could tell, the best innovation is what draws on the past in the best ways. And so, I contrast that people who make stuff up and call that innovation. It's like a middle school band concert. No one wants to go to that, including the parents. But the real innovation that's creative and life-giving is more like a jazz combo at Preservation Hall in New Orleans. And those people have a deep history and knowledge of the past. They have tremendous skills, and that's what enables them to listen to each other and make beautiful music. And so the best and most creative innovation is also that which draws from the past in the most life-giving way.
As you're saying that, I remember hearing an interview with Larry Bossidy, who was a famous corporate executive. And he said when he was rising through the ranks at company, he said, boy, if I had to be in charge, I'm just going to hire a bunch of young people and we're just going to innovate, innovate, innovate. Well, he got to that position and did that. And he goes, this is a mess. So he said, so you need seasoned people. And I'm glad you're touching on the quote tradition, because we don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, do we? So
right. It's Yaroslav Pelikan, the great historian at Yale, made this really beautiful distinction. He said, traditionalism is the dead faith of the living. Tradition is the living faith of the dead. You want to get rid of traditionalism, all the destructive stuff and the stuff that's no longer useful or no longer relevant. And yet you want tradition that's a lively heritage on which you can build.
Right. No, there's a quote too, and then I've heard when you talk about traditional innovation, there's a moral imagination to it. What does moral imagination mean to you, Greg?
Well, I think that it's a capacity to envision a future that is bright and can be life-giving for everybody. And I think that, I've been saying that particularly in the era of COVID and what I call multiple pandemics, we've been suffering as a culture from imagination deficit disorder, that we're on our heels and it's hard to envision the future. And a moral imagination is one that says, let's look to the future and let's make it a better future than what we've had now or in the past. We can make things better. We can cultivate that for life-giving character for all people. And so that spurs us and draws us forward in that way. That also depends on the creative arts. You think about the kind of imagination that you see in a great Pixar movie, for example, or in a great musical ensemble. It takes you to places that inspire and encourage.
Well, those are two great examples of something that you speak about and address, and it's storytelling. So we always talk stories, but how do you see storytelling complement innovation?
Well, storytelling is so important because it's what makes sense of our lives. That we Elie Wiesel, the great Jewish scholar, used to say, he had a phrase that he said, God loves humanity. God loves stories. That's why he created humanity.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Whenever we meet each other, we tell a story about ourselves, and we want to inhabit an imaginative story. And you see that in young children who love to have the same story read over and over to them because they imagine it and they live into it. And the greatest crises that happen to us are when we lose our sense of being part of a larger story that can give us interpretive context. There's a story told by a Jewish writer who says it's rooted in the story in the book of Numbers in the Hebrew Bible or in the Old Testament for Christians. And it's about the Israelites deciding they can't face the future, so they want to go back to Egypt. She says, when they decide they want to go back to Egypt, she says they suffered a death worse than physical death. It was the death of their imagination.
That's very powerful.
That if you lose a sense of a story and a future, that could be worse than actually dying physically.
Well, it's and when you say that, it comes from numerology or the numbers in the book, but in the Bible, but it is contemporary because when we fear the future, we cling to the past, and it's okay to, as you just said, tradition is fine, but we can't go back and live there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. We can't, and that's it often creates a kind of nostalgia. And my grandfather used to tell me that nothing accounts for a longing for the good old days quite so much as a bad memory. And, we're future-oriented people, and we're oriented toward that future. That's part of what distinguishes us as human beings. And when we can do that, we're inhabiting a story that's really exciting and adventurous.
You mentioned, as you said that, I was thinking about the great playwright Horton Foote. Grew up in East Texas, and he was with elders and his aunts, and he goes, I remember them so often saying things like, times have never been as bad as they are now. And but it would be that kind of repetition stuff. And he said, and of course it wasn't, they moved forward. But when we get locked, and we're in challenging crisis times now, times of division. And so we need hope, we need stories. So does traditional innovation give us hope, or give you hope, Greg? So
yeah, it actually gives me a lot of hope. And that when I became president, we made the theme for my inaugural year, Let Hope Abound. And part of that was just the sense that, so many of us were in the midst of COVID and other pandemics and issues. We were all on our heels. And I wanted the theme to be something that was forward looking and prospective and could inspire and encourage people. Little did I know that it would catch hold quite as profoundly as it did, because there was that sense of, oh, we can be hopeful about the future. I was downtown at a reception, and somebody came over to me and said, oh, are you the president of Belmont? And I said, yes. And he said, y'all are the hope people. There are a lot worse ways to be identified than being the hope people.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. So I would take that as a positive. So when you talk about, but as you know, because you are, as a university president, there's the subtext of your role is you are an executive, and as an executive, you got to make things happen. So hope is wonderful. How do you enact hope? How do you put it into action, Greg? So.
Well, it's a great question, and I say that if you have God-sized dreams for the future and no execution, you have fantasy. If you have execution without the dreams, you have bureaucracy. And the key is to actually bring those dreams and that execution together. And that's really what I see my role as. And I think one of the key ways I do it is to create teams of people that then work really effectively together. So I try to bring people together and then turn them loose to dream and imagine and execute on it. And that means there's a lot of moving parts and hopefully a lot of creative energy.
Well, that's great. Well, there is one thing I know. I live in a university town, Ann Arbor, which has the University of Michigan. And if there's one thing that I've learned about universities, is there's such a thing as competing priorities. So yeah. as a university president, how do you find balance between students, faculty, staff? Oh, and by the way, donors and alumni. Yeah.
So it's a challenging task, and I think part of it is you have to have priorities. You have to know where you're headed, because otherwise you're just going to be buffeted by all those competing priorities, and then it's just a political football. And so knowing some sense of where you're going, and then in some sense it's really recognizing that there are different seasons when you need to put the accent over here, and then you need to shift and put the accent over there. It's a way of thinking about like how you guide a ship, that if you direct it too much in one direction, you've got to counterbalance it in that sense. So there are different reasons for that, but you've got
I'm going to throw you a curveball now. So I love that analogy of different seasons. And Greg, if it's my season, I love you, brother. But if it's not my season, I'm coming for you. So how do you deal with the quote disappointed? So,
well, I think Ron Heifetz has a wonderful phrase when he says that part of leadership is managing people's disappointments at a tolerable level. That you're going to fail if you try to please everyone. And that's going to be really a problem. But what you have to do is you try to manage the disappointments at a tolerable level. And that is also making sure that you don't play favorites all the time. That's not to say you never play favorites. There are things, if it's your season, John, and I'm investing in you, people are going to say, boy, Greg really likes John. He's getting all the perks. If I do that all the time, that's a problem, because then people begin to feel permanently disappointed or disenfranchised. And so I have to say, okay, now we're going to shift some focus over to Jenny or to Susie or whoever else there might be. And so it's holding those together. It's kind of like, I do think a lot about coaching in athletic teams, there is no great team that has only one star. That people play different roles, and if you want one person to score all the points, you're going to lose a lot of games.
Right. There's one thing I always think in universities, and when we talk about, because my wife just retired from the University of Michigan Medical School, and so I know a lot about how things work. And sometimes, and speaking abstractly, sometimes I think the cohort that is overlooked in universities is something called students. Do you ever sense that, Greg? And how do you focus on them? So
one of the things I love about Belmont is that it's got a long tradition of focusing on students and recognizing that that's the reason why we're here. And so we do not recruit faculty who don't love teaching. Or put positively, we recruit faculty who really love teaching and pour into our students. And I think that's an important reminder that that's what universities exist to help shape and form students to become effective leaders in a variety of vocations. And the better we do that, the better the broader world is going to be. And somewhere along the way in the 20th century, we got the idea that a research university pits itself over against good teaching. And that's unfortunate. And we lost that sense that we're really equipping people to become effective leaders for a very long time in the future.
Okay, focusing on students today, and I see it because you've been at Belmont just over a year, but before that you were at Duke, and I look at the students today, the cohort they're going through. My goodness, they've had some obstacles thrown at them. What have they taught? What have the kids of COVID, shall we say, not trying to be dismissively, but college students who have faced this pandemic? What have they taught you, Greg?
Oh, it's a great question. I really feel for them because I do think that, and I don't think we'll really know the effects of COVID for probably another 5 to 8 years, just what the long-term impact was.
Right.
I learned and watched the ways in which, particularly the students who didn't have a freshman year, because that's when COVID was at its strongest, they feel robbed of experiences. And you realize that we'll joke about how universities aren't just about information and what happens in the classroom. And yet our mental image is that students are brains on sticks. And what we realized coming out of COVID was how much of a hunger there was for relationship and community and the importance of connecting. And there is, the level of kind of mental health challenges that surfaced in COVID because people were isolated. Mm-hmm. And, last in January of this year, we decided to delay the start of in-person classes by 2 weeks. And part of that was there was a spike in COVID, and we were starting classes on January 3rd. And so we thought, well, there are going to have been a lot of New Year's Eve parties. We'll just do first 8 days of class online. It was amazing what an outcry there was from students and their parents. And what I hadn't anticipated and really had been blind to was how desperate people were for basic human connection. And the thought that they were going to be in rooms just on Zoom really frightened the kids and their parents. And so what I learned was that there is as much formation that happens in relationships and community outside the classroom as happens inside, and maybe more. And we've got to pay attention to those, to all the other dimensions of well-being, not just what's happening inside somebody's cognition.
No, I think you're so accurate. So as I look back on my college years, I remember some classes, but I remember the community, and I hadn't thought of it that way. But I'm glad you touched on the word community, because that's a special theme of mine. And I think that I seek in trying to create in the workplace. Maybe I'm naive about creating, when we talk about engagement or the antithesis of this quiet quitting. How about looking at the workplace? And I think you probably have it where you are, as a community. Does that resonate with you at all, Greg?
Oh, very significantly. I think that, we've actually emphasized very strongly, not only diversity, equity, and inclusion, we've emphasized the word belonging. What I say is, whether it's faculty, staff, or students, we want to be a community where you're not just at Belmont, you see yourself as an integral part of Belmont. And, in relation to what quiet quitting or the great resignation, what I've been saying is organizations need to be places that people want to come. There needs to be a commitment from the organization and from the people who are part of it that we're in this together. And it is that sense of community and the connection that you feel.
And and the other part of community is community doesn't mean we're all robotic. It means that we feel safe. Concepts of psychological safety. I don't have to be like you. We have our shared values, but we can disagree. And I think that is such an important element of community. Yes. And I would imagine at a university, is that how you balance competing priorities? We are Belmont at first.
Oh, absolutely. And that means that. In the same way that not all the kids in a family will feel fully appreciated all the time, and yet you don't have a favorite that you neglect the others. It is a community, and you've got to wrestle that through. And sometimes you have to say, no, this is a time when we really need to invest in our music program, or now we need to really focus on athletics or on health or whatever the dynamics are. And it is a sense that like the African notion of Ubuntu, that I am who I am because you are who you are, a rising tide lifts all boats. And we need that sense of connectivity that we're all part of the same community.
Well, you touched on something which I think is just a stellar from my point of view as an outsider, and that's your music program. And I like the fact that you have 2 tracks, as I understand it, performance and business. How did that come about, Greg?
Well, we've long had a College of Music and Performing Arts, and it's very well known, well respected. About 50 years ago, where right near Music Row, my office window actually looks out on the street that's known as Music Row.
By the way, Belmont is located in Nashville. I did not say that.
So about 50 years ago, the executives on Music Row came to Belmont and said, most of the people like us who are running the business of music on Music Row are musicians, and we don't know anything about business. So could you start a program? Well, we have now a College of Music and Performing Arts. We have a College of Business, and then we have a third entity called the College of Entertainment and Music Business. And most of a majority of our faculty in the College of Entertainment and Music Business are practitioners who have experience in industry. So it's not just a theoretical topic for them. They actually know how it works, what the pressures are, how it's changing. And so I like to say, we train the songwriters, we train the people who sing the songs, and we train the people who run the business that enables the songs to be heard.
Well, it's good about that, and I'll toot your horn. It's great because Belmont, as I sense, is this university with a deep commitment to values, a moral code, and it's good that people like that are in the music business because they're usually not considered that way.
Indeed, and we love it. And when you were down here, you got a chance to spend an evening in what we call a writer's round, and to hear the stories behind the songs is just such a life-giving and uplifting experience. And even some of the songs that are funnier or a little more edgy have a great story behind them, and that's what I love to be a part of.
You could say that traditional innovation would be something like country music, would it not? Because what was 75 years ago sound is echoes there, but it's very different today. So,
yes, and if you talk to a songwriter or a performer, the really good ones, they pay homage to those who went before them, and they often will find ways to make connections to that history in their songs in really beautiful ways.
So now we're coming. I want to ask you this: Belmont seems to be in a great place and lots of good things, and so what do you want to tell us in the mindset that goes into what's next? How do you focus on the future while balancing the needs of the present? So
it's a great question. First I'd say that, the trouble with too much of higher education is that we're preparing for 1995 in case it comes back again. And that's a problem. So, I really want to be focused on 2040 and 2050 and what's the future of work going to look like, and how do we need to focus our attention on that. We're building a new medical school that will open in 2024. And so that's a focus, but that's also an opportunity for us to say, what's the future of the healthcare workforce going to look like? And how do we deal with shortages of doctors and nurses, particularly in rural areas? And how is technology changing those dynamics? And so, we launched a Belmont Data Collaborative to look at the role data is playing in all the different vocations of our colleges. We really want to be focused on the future and preparing people to anticipate that future, which means that you've got to help form people of character and people with skills that are adaptable. Because, a lot of the jobs that our current 18 to 22-year-olds are going to have over the next 20 to 40 years don't currently exist. And so if you're preparing people just for a specific job, they'll be antiquated pretty quickly. But if you prepare people to be able to be leaders who can adapt and are nimble and have the kind of soft skills that you emphasize, John, and know how to relate to other people and emotional and social intelligence, those are the kinds of themes we're really focused on. And that also includes teamwork. So our athletics program, as well as our music program and musical theater, they all emphasize how people work together in teams. And I think that's a real crucial dimension of the future.
I love how you balance character and skills, because character is, we strengthen it. Sometimes it cracks a bit, but we try to repair it. But that becomes our essence or who we are. But then the skills are transitory. But if we have the means and to learn how to, as my father always used to say, college will teaches you how to learn. And so that's the idea.
I hope we create a community of learners that will see Belmont as a touch point throughout their ongoing journey of learning.
That's great. Well, we are coming toward the end, Greg, and I always ask every guest a story about grace. Do you have a story you'd like to share with us?
Oh boy, I have lots of stories about grace. I've written a couple books on forgiveness, so I think a lot about those kinds of examples of grace. I think the story that I'd like to share is one that happened in a conversation I had yesterday. And it was actually, from a surprising context, a professor of mathematics out at Harvey Mudd College in California, who started a correspondence with a guy in prison. And the prisoner was teaching himself mathematics in the midst of a 32-year sentence. And what happened out of that relationship was this distinguished professor of mathematics, started investing in this prisoner because he was discovering in the study of math, which wasn't going to do him much good because he was serving a 30-year sentence, but he began to discover what it means to be human and what it means to care about good things by learning math. And the relationship got so rich that when Francis, this professor of mathematics, published a book, he asked the prisoner to write the foreword. And when I talked to him about it in an interview in front of our students, I said, tell me about that relationship. And he said, well, most people think it was me teaching him math. And what I really discovered was he was teaching me grace.
Oh, wow. Wow. What a story, and I'm glad you said that it was a story you heard yesterday, and then you prefaced it, but I've written a couple of books on forgiveness, which are intimately tied to grace, of course. But isn't that the magic of grace? We learn about it daily. You're an expert. You're an ordained minister. You know all this stuff. You're in that, but yet it comes and touches us. And then the story of Francis and acknowledging what he had learned. It's not about me. It's about the others. So
yeah, it was, I learn it afresh every day, and it often comes from surprising places.
Great. Well, Greg, it's been such a pleasure to meet you. Is there a place we can find you on your LinkedIn, or how would you like to be identified? I mean,
find me on LinkedIn. I should say. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find more about me at president.belmont.edu or email at l.gregory.jones@belmont.edu.
President Gregory Jones, it has been such an honor to speak to you, my friend. Thank you for spending time with us. And with that, we will close out.